Let's talk to Vlad. Pronouns he, him, calling in from irritated nudibranchs. Talk about sea slugs they're a little bit on edge. You know what I'm talking about? Has multiple sources of evidence supporting Christianity as the true religion. And in parentheses here, it says eyewitness testimonies, the tomb, and the Pilate stone. That probably means something. Pilot stone. That's right. Yes, I know that one. I have never seen that spelled out. I'll be honest with you. Vlad, you're on the line with Forrest and Eric. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you? I like your bookshelf. It's pretty cool.
Thank you. We both have bookshelves behind us. But
mine's all blurred.
Yeah.
The one in focus.
I wish yours was blurred out, Eric. I'm a bookshelf collector. Yeah. I used to work in IKEA.
Nice.
Yeah,
oh, yeah. This is my office, and then I've got the other shelf over here, and then I've got the 2 shelves in my studio, and then the living room is where the main library is. I can't get enough. I love them so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you certainly have good style. So
thank you. That's very kind of you. That's the first time anyone has ever said that to me.
Hey, no problem. I mean, I feel like we could all do with a little bit of cheering up after that last guy defending slavery. Unbelievable.
Good gravy. It's a bad time. So Vlad, tell us about Christianity and why you believe these things. We would love to talk to you.
Well, yeah. So as a Christian, growing up in like a family in Indiana, that's where what the IN means. I'm not sure if I heard something different, but basically it's a red state, and I was expected to be a Christian, and I still am one. However, I am teetering on the edge of Christian and whatever, I guess, atheist agnostic. But right now I have some evidence I'd like to present to prove the point that Christianity is real, and that mainly has basis in the eyewitness testimonies of the Bible, and also my problems with evolution. Those would be the more that latter would be the more, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm down with it. Eric's definitely more equipped to talk about Christianity. I'm more equipped to talk about evolution, so we can run right through it if you like.
Yeah, that's great. I was actually gonna just put this in your ear before we get to the evolution part. Evolution and theism are not mutually exclusive. They can both be true at the same time. So if you were to say, hey, I don't believe in evolution, and here's the reasons why, that doesn't really get you any closer to your God. It just simply gets you personally further away from evolution. But that's a later thing.
But
anyway, So with the Christianity thing, what do you want to talk about first? You want to talk about the eyewitnesses first? You want to talk about the tomb first? Or I don't know much about Pilate Stone, but we can talk about the first two if you want.
Yeah, the eyewitness testimonies would be the most.
Okay.
I guess the most important for me to hear about. Yes. Or to discuss.
What in your opinion is the best eyewitness testimony in the Bible?
I would say that out of all the testimonies, I'm sorry. Okay. So I believe that.
Echo. You having phone problems? Are you okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm getting called right now. Sorry.
It's all good.
So what is your best example of a eyewitness testimony in the Bible?
So 1 Corinthians 15, 3-8, where Paul recounts the creed summarizing the resurrection of Jesus. That would be the most. Would you like me to read that to you?
Give it to me one more time so I can pull it up. 1 Corinthians
15, 3-8.
Got it.
All right. Let's see here. I'll go ahead and read it since you're having phone issues. What do you have a preferred version of the Bible, Vlad?
The New Testament.
Well, no. Okay. The preferred version of the New Testament, like New International, King James. Do you have a preference? No.
No.
Okay, fine. I'll go with New International because that's the default here. Here it goes. 1 Corinthians 15, 3-8. And this is Paul writing this, supposedly. I think, I'm not sure if it's one of the commonly accepted genuine letters of Paul, but we'll worry about that later. For what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas and then to the 12. After that, he appeared to more than 500 of our brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all, he appeared to me also as to one abnormally born. Is that pretty much the gist of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we established that Paul's writing this, right?
Yes.
Okay. So are these eyewitness testimonies? Or is this one person's report of eyewitness testimonies?
Well, this is a one person's report of over 500 witnesses who saw the risen Jesus.
Okay. And I'm not taking off the table that those reports were genuine, but for a moment, pretend those reports aren't genuine. Let's say that none of this is really true. What are some other explanations you can come up with to explain this scripture, aside from these testimonies are actually given to Paul?
Well, so okay, he was a former persecutor of like Christians that because of his conversion, but then he claimed to have seen Jesus on the road to Damascus. He just saw him risen, just walking around, and he decided that's when he decided that, oh my God, this I need to convert. I feel like Christianity is, and I feel like he had a reason to transform there because he saw the risen Jesus and he was like, oh, this is what I was thinking is wrong, and I've seen this happen. So that's probably one of the most.
Just throw this out there. I'm not changing this to a political. I'm not changing this to a political call, so don't mistake what I'm saying here. But just as an example, also the current or the vice president elect called Donald Trump America's Hitler and talked about how he should never be allowed into office, and is now the vice president elect under Trump because it was profitable for him to change his mind or pretend to. And so, like, people can change their minds for a lot of reasons. This guy might have been, convinced because he saw Jesus, or he could see this fun new religion taken off and have jumped on board with it. Or he could have gotten like a lot of money or sexual favors out of being a cult leader. Who knows? There's a lot of issues that it could have been. Or it could just not be true. This guy could also have not have existed in this way, and this letter isn't real. Who knows? But like, I'm just saying, like, just because this guy in the story was one thing and then changed another thing, I understand your point, but you have to understand that even that is a dubious claim to make.
Yeah, and Vlad, to address the what Forrest was just saying there, I like looking at things, looking at claims with levels of confidence, right? So when I hear a claim from somebody, internally, I evaluate evidence, I evaluate past experiences, I evaluate plausibility and how things fit into my worldview, and then I'll determine whether I have high confidence or low confidence that a certain claim is true. And I think we all do that at a certain level with pretty much everything we hear. In a vacuum, Vlad, so I'm going to make it a little hypothetical. Let's say you're walking down the street, and in a vacuum, no other things considered, somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, Vlad, I saw God yesterday." What's your level of confidence that that person is telling you the truth? Or that, rather, I take that back, that person's telling you something that actually really happened?
So in this hypothetical, I would, it would depend on, I guess, several factors. And like, sure, without any context, if the guy just straight up came up to me and said, I saw God yesterday. Yeah, my confidence would be like pretty low, just because like if you have a claim that's so extraordinary, you need some extraordinary evidence.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm the same way too. So that's kind of like my base starting point is I'm going to have low confidence because this is an extraordinary claim that Paul saw Jesus on the road to Damascus, and then he later claimed it to be true. So I'll frame the question the same again as I did earlier, But let's say Paul actually didn't see Jesus on the road to Damascus. What other explanations might there be? And this is what Forrest was getting to earlier. What other explanations might there be aside from he genuinely saw Jesus?
I guess there is James. He's the brother of Jesus, and he was a skeptic during his ministry. But then he became a leader in the early church after seeing the resurrection. So
How do we know that? Hold on, Vlad. Okay, but how do we know that, though?
It was written in Acts 15 and 13, Galatians 1 to 19.
Okay, it's written in Galatians, which I believe is another one of the Paul's letters. Yeah. So Paul, you're basically saying, well, we can trust Paul's claim here because Paul made this other claim over here in this other letter. Does that really increase our confidence in that claim?
Well,
like for instance,
yes,
the guy, hold on. For instance, the guy on the road that claimed he saw God yesterday, he then pulls out a letter and says, "Look, I wrote a letter to this other person claiming I saw God. Here you go, read it." Would that raise your confidence in that guy's claim?
Okay, I see where you're coming from, but you have to understand that there's probably many other perspectives that claim that James also became a leader in this church, because even if Paul just wrote about it, Paul could write about an apple falling from a tree. It's basically just post-suppositionalism, because you're like trying to say that like Paul wrote about something, and because he like also writes about other things, they can end up just like having no credible value because he could be wrong about just one thing.
Vlad, that's actually not what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's not credible. All right. Well, actually, I take that back. Okay. I don't find credibility in it. I'm not saying it's false. Okay. Paul very well could have seen Jesus on the road to Damascus, and he very well could have reported that to the Galatian congregation. Those are not off the table, but I'm talking about levels of confidence. So with the guy in the street example, right? You have low confidence that he actually saw God. And I asked you the question, if he handed you a letter that he wrote himself to another person about seeing God, me personally, that wouldn't raise my confidence at all if he handed me that letter. Same thing with Paul. I'm not saying what he's saying is false. I'm saying I have very, very low confidence in it. And going back to the question earlier, what would be other explanations for the report? So with the guy in the street, what other explanations can you come up with that why this guy's telling you what he's telling you?
Well, in the right now, if there was a guy who told me that, I wouldn't believe him, and I wouldn't have any explanations.
What other reasons? Well, you can reasonably, think of something, like just some possibilities. Nothing you have to prove. But for instance, if a guy came up to me on the street and said, "Hey, I saw God," I wouldn't believe him. I would think maybe he's trying to trick me. Maybe he's hallucinating. Maybe maybe he genuinely believes he saw God, but he's got false memories. Maybe he has something to gain out of it. Maybe he thinks he's doing something right by lying to me. Like all kinds of reasons. Very plausible explanations, because we know that people lie all the time. We know people who have hallucinations all the time. We know people misremember all the time. We know people this and that all the time. Lots and lots of examples. We have no confirmed examples of somebody actually seeing a God. That's why my confidence is so low. So bringing that back to Paul, let's say Paul didn't actually see Jesus on the road to Damascus. What other explanations can we come up with to explain it?
Sorry, do you mind if I write down some of your points?
Absolutely. Yeah, take your time. You can always go back and listen to the conversation too if you want to take notes. But I'll just cut to the chase here. I can think of, and this is what Forrest mentioned earlier, I can think of all kinds of reasons why Paul reported this. Maybe he hallucinated and he genuinely believes he saw Jesus, but he really didn't. He hallucinated it because either he was feeling grief and guilt over persecuting Christians and seeing all these people suffer because of the things that he was doing. Maybe he was a businessman, an entrepreneur. He saw opportunity to take advantage of people and get money and get clout and get fame. He could travel the Mediterranean. He can get free food and lodging and probably some women if he really tried. Like, these are very plausible, reasonable explanations for why Paul would make these reports. And it could also be that Paul kickstarted religion by doing this. Like, very plausible. So in my mind, when I compare the plausibility of either of these two, either, a hallucination, false memories, or motivated lies versus he actually saw God, I'm going to go with the plausible stuff. I don't have any good reason to believe that these reports are genuine. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, good. You're good. Go ahead.
Okay. So earlier you said that because we're assuming that what if Paul was insincere, and what if what he saw wasn't really true? Mm-hmm. Because what if he had gain? But as you can see in Corinthians 11:23 and some other text, he gets nothing from preaching the gospel, but his imprisonment, beatings, and you have to realize that this guy is over here saying persecuting people who are Christians because he hates, he feels like this is not the truth, and he just persecutes these Christians. And then he just decides to he just tries to preach the gospel, and then he ends up getting imprisoned, stoned, and he sees all this he gets put into a state of poverty, as you can see in Philippians 4:12.
I understand. Paul paints a very vivid, impressive story, which could be true. All that stuff could have happened and all that. But let's bring it back to the guy in the street example. So after handing you that letter that he wrote to somebody else claiming he saw God, he then tells you, man, I've taken so much abuse for telling people that I saw God. I've been beaten. I've been imprisoned. I've been jeered. I've had tomatoes and rotten eggs thrown at me. I have been so abused because of these claims that I've been making. Would that raise your confidence in his claim if he were to tell you those things?
Not unless I saw it on his physical person. No. If it was just a regular guy telling me he did all this, then no, I would not.
Let's say he had some bruises on him. Let's say he had some tomato smear on his shirt. That's still even if you had physical.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But I was just saying, people do get thrown into a mental institution, get thrown into a drunk tank in jail. People do get beaten up by cops for being belligerent, and if they're out here preaching. There's plenty of videos of devout Christians fighting with police officers because they believe they should be free because God said so. Those things exist. We can assume those people are maybe having a mental issue and they're not able to keep up with it. That's a problem. But assuming one of them is true, you would still have the same level of doubt that you should reasonably have now. Even though this person really genuinely is being persecuted for spreading their beliefs in the way that they think they should, and for whatever else. That's just, I need you to, because Vlad, the thing for me is that I've heard what you're saying before. Why is this person going to allow themselves to be beaten, to be imprisoned, to be jailed, to be harassed, to lose everything, to be killed? This guy was beheaded, they were hanged, they were crucified, upside down, whatever other thing. These quotes come quite a bit. And assuming these things are true, all that tells you is that this person is very, very convinced of their claim. If this is true, then the most we can say is that this guy was more devout than you. But that doesn't mean that he was right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and Forrest actually beat me there. We could grant all of Paul's claims about the abuse that he suffered because of the stuff he was saying. And in my book, that doesn't at all add any credibility to him actually seeing God on the road to Damascus.
Right.
All those things could be true, and it doesn't increase my confidence in his God claim whatsoever. It increases my confidence that he believed it, but not that he actually saw a God on the road to Damascus.
I have a totally different.
So you're saying because there's no evidence. So you're saying because there's no evidence that this guy could just be rambling, there is a chance, and therefore we can't believe him.
So again, I didn't say that. I didn't say it's definitely false. I'm going to go ahead and just grant that it's possible and it could be true. Okay, I can grant all that,
yeah,
but my confidence in that is so low that it's virtually zero. Nothing in the Bible is going to raise my confidence above that, because, as you said, I wouldn't say it's no evidence. I say we have a lot of very bad evidence in the Bible. This is evidence that can be. This is good evidence. Are things that point to a very, very few amount of conclusions, preferably one conclusion. Good evidence points to only one conclusion that can explain that evidence. The evidence we're presented in the Bible points to many conclusions. One of them could be, yeah, he genuinely saw God. But the other ones could be the stuff we mentioned earlier with hallucinations, bad memories, motivations, wanting to take advantage of people. Maybe he was just really fucking guilty for all the persecution he put down on people, and he had some type of mental break. We don't know. But good evidence would point to only one of those, and the evidence we have in the Bible points to virtually all of them. So the evidence in the Bible, in my opinion, is not good evidence.
That's the thing that gets me about it, Vlad, is that the Bible is the claim. It is not the evidence. And so, like, we can look at
built upon a complete.
I'm sorry.
It's built on a complete claims, right, with no tangible evidence, and all these Paul's letters are just what he's saying, but we can't fully believe him, even though there is a chance that what he's saying is true. That's what you're trying to say, right?
More or less, to give it some sort of courtesy to say, okay, maybe, there's always a chance. Maybe this guy is telling the truth. Mm-hmm. However, I think that because it is packaged in a book, which is full of things that are obviously false and obviously immoral and obviously very much human-made, you take this one piece of this book and you say, okay, this part here is the part that means that the rest of it is at least somewhat true. I need more than that. And even if it is true, I'm going to treat Paul and his writings with the same level of respect and credulity and skepticism as I would be expected, and I would expect anybody to treat anybody else making the same kind of claims, given the same context. If somebody came up to me and said that there's this God and also had some reason, some serious reason for me to believe it, then that would be something I would take seriously. But if someone came up to me with the exact level of evidence that Paul's giving, with the exact level of confidence that Paul's giving, in the exact communication style that Paul's giving, everything completely perfectly mirroring Paul in every single way about any other God, I doubt you would take it very seriously. And I don't think you should either. It's just because it's in a book that you have been taught is somehow reliable that I think you're giving it a little more credence than you should.
You're right.
I'm not saying it's absolutely wrong. I'm just saying you should be more skeptical of it.
Yeah. So Vlad, like I mentioned earlier, you want to ask yourself, what should your confidence level in these claims be? What's your default confidence level in a vacuum, which is why we had that base question with the guy on the street. What's your base level confidence? And ask yourself, what is raising my confidence in the claim? And am I reasonable and am I justified in using those reasons to raise my confidence? Because we haven't even touched upon other things, like the fact that scholarly consensus is only 6 out of the 13 Paul letters in the Bible are considered genuine. The other 7 are considered to be forgeries. We haven't even talked about, I don't know if you ever heard of this, the synoptic problem with the main Gospels themselves. We see evidence of copying in the Gospels. We see evidence of a thing called writer's fatigue in the copying. It's very, very fascinating stuff, when you're looking at the actual Gospels themselves. But those compound the problem, because I already have super duper low confidence in Paul's claims. And then you have the other books in the Bible that weren't written by Paul that would, in other cases, raise my confidence in those claims, but they have some major issues. Like for the fact that likely Matthew and Luke copied Mark, or all 3 of them copied some other source that we no longer have access to. The fact that all the Gospels were written anonymously in other countries in a completely different language, Greek. Things like that keep my confidence super duper low in all of this stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it could all be true. And why a God would allow these problems to creep in and keep my confidence low, because I've enjoyed our conversation. I think we're both acting in pretty good faith here. I mean, I think you are, and I can tell you that I'm genuinely engaging with you, and I genuinely want to know the truth behind these things. But these are things that I see that keep my confidence low, because I am taking a look at it objectively and honestly. And if this stuff is true and a God really is behind this, why did he allow these problems in here? Because these problems that he allowed in is keeping me out of the faith. Because I refuse to lower my standards, of evidential evaluation, to lower my standards of logic, to accept these things, because I see such obvious glaring problems there. And I would not do this for Islam. I would not do this for Judaism. I'm not going to do it for Christianity. So the question is, why would a God allow these things, this situation to be the case, if he was actually behind it? And that's something, that's not a rhetorical question. I'm asking you why that would be the case. That's probably something you should ask yourself, on your own. Like, why would God allow these problems to be in the Bible? Couldn't God have done a better job? If saving as many souls as possible is his objective, couldn't he have done a better job? Because at this rate, I want to be a lost soul because I see these glaring issues in the Bible that God could have prevented.
Well, I believe that the Discovery Institute has...
Vlad, if your phone went to sleep, we can't hear you. And I want to hear what you just said. Oh, Vlad dropped.
Okay.
I didn't touch the thing. Vlad went away.
Okay,
Vlad,
fine.
if you're still listening, like, lines are full, but I want Vlad back because I want to dig into what he just said. Because the Discovery Institute is a bad way to start that sentence. But, like,
that's a quite... just dropping that turd and leaving. It's like, what?
Yeah,
Discovery Institute.
I wanted to hear his response to you, and more importantly, I had a different way that I wanted to address almost exact same thing that you were saying. I just had a slightly different way to go about it that I wanted to hear him argue with. And I don't know, like, people in the chat seem pretty convinced that he was a troll. And that was
I'd be
his
a troll.
reveal,
Yeah.
which, who knows? But I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Even on a troll call, even if that was a troll call, number one, I have gotten so many calls exactly like that are sincere, and I'm really glad that people who do believe the things that Vlad was claiming to believe can hear that and can hear the response to that. I wanted to throw out, in also in the Bible, Vlad was talking about in 1 Corinthians, there's this one account of Paul saying this one thing. Well, here in John, I have a much, much more poignant story that I think is really important. This is in St. John chapter 20, verse 24 through 31. So this is Jesus is risen and is coming before the disciples and saying, yo, here I am. Hey, what's up? And so he's meeting the disciples, but in verse 24, but Thomas, one of the 12 disciples, who was called Didymus, was not with them when Jesus came. The other disciples therefore said unto him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see his hands and the prints of the nails, and put my finger into the prints of the nails, and I thrust my hands into the hole in his side, I will not believe. So this is a guy who knew Jesus, who knew that he was crucified, who is now being approached by his 11 friends who also knew Jesus personally. And his 11 friends who knew Jesus come up to him, who knew Jesus, and say, Jesus is back. And he says, I don't believe you. And I want to see if this person's really him. I want to put my fingers into the holes in his hands, into the holes in his side. I want to feel the stigmata. I want to know for sure that this is really who you say that it is. This motherfucker knew this guy was around and met him personally and was still willing to exhibit some skepticism. And then what happens next? After 8 days, the disciples again were within, and Thomas with them. Then came Jesus, and the doors being shut, he stood in their midst and said, peace be unto you. And then he said to Thomas, reach hither thy finger and behold my hands, and reach hither thy hand, thrust your hand into my side, be not faithless, but believing. He tells Thomas, here he comes there. It takes him 8 days, and he gets there and he says, put your fingers in my fucking handholes, bro. Put your fingers in my sides.
Put your fingers in my holes.
Do the thing. And Thomas fingers Jesus. It says, right, and he does this, and then he says, you are the Lord my God. And then in verse 29, he then says, Thomas, because you have seen me, because you have received me, now blessed are you. And the next verse says, many other signs truly did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written that ye might believe in Jesus, and that believing in him you shall gain eternal life. It says in John, arguably one of the most fucking crazy and vitriolic and zealous gospels. In John, it says that the guy who knew Jesus doubted his resurrection, and Jesus appeared before him, allowed him to feel his wounds, and then perform many other acts that they didn't even bother to write down to prove over and over and over and over that he is who he says he is. But you, now, 2025, you have to rely on a 1,000 times translated, 1,000 times interpreted, 1,000 times changed and altered for the benefit of kings and priests and whoever else, this monstrosity of a book that justifies slavery, that allows for genocide, that commands, sexual servitude, that this book full of homophobia and hatred and evil and sexism and monstrosity after monstrosity after monstrosity, that's all you've got is the passed down telephone game for 2,000 years. Some guy said it a while ago, you need to believe it. Meanwhile, these people apparently got proof after proof after proof, and you're denied that. And instead, the church tells you, blessed are those who have not seen and still believe. Fuck off. Absolutely not. If this God can do it for Thomas, this God should do it for you.
Yeah, but Forrest, Discovery Institute.
But the Discovery Institute, right?
Yeah.
It's a whole thing, man.
Troll or not, he was engaging with a few of the questions pretty genuinely. So,
yeah.
Hopefully some of the audience got. Oh, okay. Hopefully some of the audience got something good out of that, but we'll see.
Yeah. But let's talk to him for a second if it's cool with you.
Oh, okay. He's back.
Yeah, Vlad, you're back on.
Hey, what's up? Sorry, my phone got disconnected. Yeah,
it's okay. Did you hear everything that I just said?
No, I'm sorry.
So I will summarize it because I'm not going to say that whole sermon again. But in the book of John, you gave your one eyewitness evidence thing. In the book of John, in verses, it's the very, very end of this chapter. It's chapter 20, verses 24 through 31, is the story of St. Thomas, that Jesus Christ comes back and meets with the 12 disciples, or he meets with 11 of the 12 disciples, and Thomas isn't there. And so Thomas, who's also called Didymus, apparently, says the 11 disciples come to Thomas and they say, hey, we just met Jesus. He's back, yo. And Thomas says, I don't fucking believe you. I want to feel the holes in his hand, the holes in his feet, the holes in his side. And Jesus appears before Thomas and says, finger me. And he does. And he feels all these holes. And then, only then does he believe. And the next part, the very last part of it, says that many other signs, many other proofs Jesus provided that they didn't even bother to write down in the Bible. So Jesus appeared before this person who didn't believe in him, even though this person knew him personally, had met him in person, still appeared before him and let him prove this over and over and over to him. And then, only then, did he allow this person to believe. And still, he is blessed, and still he's called a saint. Why won't this God provide you the same level of evidence? Why do you have to believe in a dusty old Iron Age sex and slavery manual? Why can't you get some sort of actual proof?
Because I think the proof is in the sorry. So, okay, I think that the Australopithecus.
Okay, so yeah, so it is a troll. All right, well, at least we got to talk about it for a second.
Yeah,
it's actually I appreciate the fact that we at least got the verification that we needed, that he wasn't serious. But hey, that shows the seriousness of that kind of rhetoric.
Troll or not, we dissect for the sake of the audience. So
that's true. That is
we got
true.
what we wanted out of that,
right? Yeah, I was willing to give him one more just benefit of the doubt because I tried to be a nice guy, even though it was looking pretty solidly. But like, hey, man.
Hey, what's up? I'm glad you enjoyed that clip of people talking to each other. I'm Jimmy, and this is Eric. And well, we'd really love it if you would support us. Where can they support us, Eric? Where would they do that?
I don't know, Jimmy, because I don't have the notes on me right now.
This is
but I
too
think it's
long. The outros have to be short. Patreon.com/call the line.